Every time I facilitate, I really just like get this warm fuzzy because I'm like, look at all the people who care. It just makes my heart happy. And building consistent practice can be really hard. And one of the things that we've tried to do here is create some more opportunities for consistent practice. So on Monday through Friday, from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., we've been having a morning sit. It's just an hour-long silent sit every weekday. Because we're hardcore like that. And there are a couple of us that kind of are facilitators within the Sangha. So it's myself and Roy. And then we have another Sangha member who's been with us since the beginning, since we started this new group maybe a month ago. And he and Roy are morning people, right? And so they can get to the center by 6 o'clock pretty easy, right? They're like hanging out, doing the thing. So I don't feel a ton of pressure to be the one here to open the center because, believe it or not, people actually show up to come and meditate at 6:30 in the morning, which is awesome. The problem with this week is Roy and Brandon, the two who help open the center, are both on vacation. They're both gone. So who's the one who needs to open the center every morning at 6? This one. And it's not that I'm not a morning person. It is that I have a job that requires me to be out fairly late, and I don't sleep very well. So my body and 6 a.m. don't always really get along, but my mind really wants to, and my heart really wants to. And so this week, on Monday, I knew it was like time. Okay, here we go, it's gonna happen. I set like 10 alarms, and I wake up to a call from Roy, a text from a couple people. Hey, no one came to open the center this morning. And I was like, oof, yeah, unpleasant. That's not the person I want to be, right? And I'm like, I'm so sorry, y'all. Like, my alarms didn't wake me up. I don't know what happened. And so I was like, I got y'all. Tomorrow, I'm going to be there. I'm going to make it happen. And so Tuesday, my dog wakes me up at 4:30 in the morning. And I'm like, all right, I'll let you out. You're cute. And I go back to sleep on the couch to make sure that, I'm ready to roll when the alarm hits. I wake up, again, to several texts and calls. Oh, we just decided to sit outside. It's fine. I'm like, whoa, that doesn't feel good. And would you believe this happened a third time on Wednesday? But that time, I believe I woke up and panic drove 70 miles an hour down McGavick so I could get here 10 minutes late. Because that's wise. But it got me thinking a lot about guilt and shame and remorse. Because I noticed when I started my day like that, when I started my day in this guilt and this shame, not that anybody was putting that guilt and shame on me. They're like, oh, good, you're good, we love you, do the thing. But that guilt and shame really painted the rest of my day and inevitably my week. Smoked a ton of cigarettes. I was like, I'm the worst. You ever have those days, those moments, and where the mind just gets really latches on to this guilt or this shame and creates these stories. So for what reason, I don't really know. But it can be really stressful and painful, and it can make it hard to do anything that feels wholesome. So that's what we're talking about today, is guilt and shame. And specifically, how do we free the heart from guilt and shame? So we'll talk mainly, what does the Dharma have to say about these things? I want to go into the difference between remorse and guilt as well. And then how can we actually practice to get our heart more inclined to being free from these things and not create extra suffering for ourselves. So I listened to a lot of Dharma talks and podcasts on guilt and shame this week because I needed it, and I was like, well, I guess that's what I'm going to talk about on Friday. And one of the things that was offered was taking a look at what we've done and really asking ourselves, did I do anything wrong? Right? Which feels weird because in this culture, I feel like I'm always doing something wrong, all right? Or like somebody else is always doing something wrong. How can you really tell what's right and wrong? And then there was a little switch in my head that flipped and said, maybe it's less about right and wrong and it's more about wholesome and unwholesome. It's more about skillful and unskillful. So the Buddha was a teacher of action, right? He was a teacher of go do the thing, go figure it out, go sit, go ask the questions. And he talks about wholesome and unwholesome deeds all throughout the suttas, like a ton of times. I think it's like over 80 discourses he talks about unwholesome and wholesome deeds. And one thing I think that's really interesting is when you start to think about, okay, what does wholesome and unwholesome mean? Wholesome just leads to peace and happiness. Unwholesome leads to suffering. So when you're asking yourself, is this thing that I feel really guilty about or shameful for, do I really need to feel guilty and shameful about it? Did I really do something wrong here? Because even if you did do something wrong, we'll learn guilt and shame does not have a ton of space to thrive in a practice rooted in love, in my opinion. But not waking up to my alarms and missing 3 days in a row, is that wholesome or unwholesome? Did I do something wrong, or did I learn something about my values? And so he talks about wholesome and unwholesome. And so really it's a good kind of little test to be like, I'm feeling guilty about something. We love a little checkbox moment. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? If it's not any of these things, maybe I don't need to feel so awful, right? And even if it is, there's ways to start to learn how to work with it. So I'll list these out. There's 10 unwholesome deeds, and they come from a couple different places, but the first 4 are from the precepts. Has anyone ever been on a meditation retreat before? So you know there's precepts where it's like, I'm not going to do this and this and this and this. And sometimes if you're new to the practice, they come across as rules. And I just want to go ahead and say they're not rules. None of these are rules. None of these are like, if you do this, you can't be in our club. It's more, if you do these things, you might have a bad time, right? And so the first one is killing or taking life of any living being. If you do that, you're probably going to have a bad time, right? It's not always a wholesome action or deed. The second one is taking what is not freely given, stealing. The third one is sexual misconduct. The fourth one is false speech. The fifth one is malicious speech. The sixth one is harsh speech. And the seventh one is idle chatter. So far, it doesn't say not waking up to your alarms yet. But then we get into these last 3, which are greed or longing, hatred or ill will, and lack of right view or delusion. So it's interesting. I go down this list and I think about some of the things I feel really guilty and shameful for, and none of them are really on the list. But what actually does end up being on the list is my reaction to the thing, right? So if I, for example, show up late several days in a row or miss something several days in a row, that is not as unwholesome sometimes as what my mind will do, the hatred that it will pull out, and the harsh speech I will say to myself. Or even last night, y'all, my wife and I were coming home from a family event, and she has a lot of driving anxiety. And so when I'm driving, she's like backseat driver times 10,000. And so I was pulling, but she also insists that we back into the driveway. It's like very important to her. So I'm backing into the driveway, and there's a car coming behind us. And she goes, oh, and I'm like, I know. And then I literally just stopped for a second. I was like, I am so sorry. Because I don't speak to my wife that way ever. But think about how much I've been ruminating on this guilt and this shame and like I can't do anything right, all these stories. And then they come out in ways we wouldn't expect, like harsh speech. So to me, it feels like really honing in and saying, okay, what is unwholesome and what is wholesome? And what is a fabrication of my own story and selfing? And what is not? Now, let's say you did do something unwholesome, causing some real harm. Let's say I ran down this list and you're like, yep, 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 yep. You can still be in the club, it's okay. We all have these memories that come up, I think at least, of a time we actually did do something harmful. A time we did, like, kill a bug. I step on snails on accident sometimes, and it makes me feel real bad. So times that we take life, or we speak to people we love, or maybe people we don't like in a harsh manner. Maybe we lie a little bit. Maybe we take what's not freely given. Maybe we've engaged in sexual misconduct. We all have these memories of things that we've done that probably fuel a lot of guilt and shame. And when the memories come up, a feeling is attached to it most of the time. And when that feeling comes up, we're like, ugh, I don't like this feeling. And so we fight it and fight it and fight it. And so today we're learning, how can we, instead of fighting that, how can we learn to transform it? The first way to transform those things is starting to understand that whatever you did is in the past. You don't do that anymore, even if it was this morning, right? In this moment, it does not seem like any of you are causing crazy harm. Good job, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's an excuse. Have y'all seen The Office before? Okay, so there's a character in The Office named Ryan, and he does some pretty like effed up stuff, and he comes back to work for The Office as a temp again, and somebody confronts him about something he did, like money he stole from them or something a while back before he, got fired and came back, and he says, "Oh, that's Ryan. I'm Ryan 2.0. I can't answer for what Ryan 1.0 did." Right, so it's not like that. It's not like, oh, I'm Maddie 2.0, so I don't have to answer to all the awful things I did when I was drinking. That's Maddie 1.0. I'm not going to worry about that. It's more so I know now, okay, that's in the past, and I can make amends. I can acknowledge that my actions were unskillful, and then learn from them. And so that's the thing. When we do something that is harmful, or if we have done something that is harmful in the past, it's about acknowledging and learning from it instead of fighting it and beating ourselves up. There's a really awesome story in the suttas that I will not go too in depth in because it could be a whole talk in itself. But anybody who's been coming here for a little while might know the story of Angulimala. Anybody? A couple people heard this? Oh, sick. Okay, I know some of y'all have heard it. Long story short, Angulimala was a serial killer during the time of the Buddha. Okay? There's a whole story as to how he got into it. He was searching for success, and He wound up like killing, I think, 999 people and cutting their pinkies off and wearing them as a necklace, which is so metal. It's so raw, so cool. And, it gets to a point where he's trying to kill the Buddha. And he can't do it. The closer he gets, the more he runs towards the Buddha, he just can't catch up. Even the Buddha's walking slow. And long story short, the Buddha brings Angulimala into the monastic life. And Angulimala becomes an arhat, or becomes enlightened and very trusted. So a serial killer literally was like an enlightened being. So this is what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that he didn't have memories of the things he did or remorse. He didn't just get a free pass like, I'm good now, promise. It was more he learned to work with that past and with those memories and feelings. Guilt and shame, like I said, just don't have a place to thrive in a liberated heart, but remorse does. And so the difference is really important when we want to think about the idea that this is not a passive practice. So guilt, let's start with this. So remorse. There's room for remorse, and remorse can be a really great tool. Because remorse shows up as a skillful act to show us what we care about. So when I wake up late 3 days in a row to open the center in the mornings and I feel remorse, that shows me I really care about the center. I really want to be here. And I care. But then what happens is guilt gets that little extra dollop of suffering that we throw on top of our remorse. Okay, I couldn't just leave it at remorse. Couldn't just say, man, all right, that's important to me. I'm going to make more of an effort there. Instead, it's the extra suffering. I throw all this guilt on it. Oh, I'm the worst. Like I'm not taking care. All that self-deprecation that sometimes shows up, right? It's the I'm not handling things, or I'm not mature enough, or I don't deserve to be with these people, and I should just, give it up. It's amazing how it spirals. And then it leads to shame. So we have remorse, which is skillful, and the second remorse shows up, we can either use it as a learning opportunity or we can let it spiral into guilt and shame. Shame is the classic, Brene Brown, I am a mistake. It's not that I made a mistake, I am a mistake. I think it's just important to note that remorse is still a really useful tool. But there's a big difference between remorse and guilt. And it's easy to roll around in guilt and shame when a memory comes up of something that we feel like we should be ashamed or guilty for, something we have remorse for. It's hard to let go of. So how do we practice to free our heart from suffering and guilt and shame? And practice is the key word. Because we really do, we hold on to these stories and this guilt and the shame for dear life, or at least I do. I don't know about y'all. But man, when guilt and shame come up, I'm like, bah, 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 bah. Yeah, give me all that. Even though it's horribly unpleasant. Has anyone seen Inside Out 2 yet? Y'all, homework, go watch it. It's great. But in this movie, it's are y'all familiar with the concept, right? It's that this teenager, it's all of her emotions running the show, and it's actually really cool how they do it. It's fascinating. But one of the things that I find really interesting is whenever Riley is the name of the kiddo that they are inside, and Riley will have a memory, something will happen and it will become a core memory. And then they take those core memories down to I don't know what they call it, storage or something, and it's the place where beliefs are formed. And those beliefs form this sense of self for Riley. And so as she gets older, the beliefs turn into, she has one bad moment where she starts to think about how she needs to be into hockey or something or whatever. And long story short, her core belief from one memory turns into, I'm not good enough, or I'll only be good enough if. And so we hold on to these stories that are formed from these memories of things that we have done that are unskillful, and then we start to define ourselves by them, which again is a whole nother Dharma talk, right? But there's a very clear way to work with when these thoughts and feelings of shame and guilt show up. The Buddha talks very clearly about it. The first thing that he says is we need to know that we cannot control its arising. Okay? So when I say guilt and shame, your sweet little mind probably brings something up. Whether it's something you feel guilty or shameful for, or somebody else, someone should feel guilty or shameful for. And that's one of the beautiful things about this practice in the Dharma is we learn that just as the ears hear all on their own or the eyes see all on their own, the mind will think. And that will elicit feeling and sensation. And so it's not personal. How nice is that? You know, have you ever noticed, like, when you're out and about somewhere, you know what, great opportunity. I was at a show on Wednesday night, and there was a lot of music that would not normally be my cup of tea, right? So we're talking, like, Creed style, like, we call it butt rock. But I noticed a lot of judgment. A lot of judgment. And you're like, okay, judgment is present. It's not, wow, I'm such a horrible person that I feel so much judgment towards this. I can't help it. The mind will think judgment. It's, do I lean into it, or do I notice that it's there and try to be skillful? So we can't control when these thoughts and feelings of shame and guilt arise, but we can control how we react to them. We can control what comes next. So it's kind of nice. He lays out a little bit of another checklist. Let's say a feeling of guilt or shame comes up. The first thing we need to do is determine if that feeling that's arising with it is agreeable or disagreeable. So if you've got something in your mind, something maybe you feel a little guilty for, a little shameful for, when that thought arises, is that an agreeable feeling or is that a disagreeable feeling? And what that means is, I think you could also say, is it a pleasant or unpleasant feeling? Right? So I think about being late for those 3 days and I feel some disagreeable nature. I don't like that. I don't like that memory. I don't like that thought. It's unpleasant. But here's the beautiful thing. You can note that and then drop it. Unpleasant. Unpleasant thought, unpleasant feeling. And then drop it. The exact simile the Buddha uses when talking about when disagreeable thoughts or feelings arise in tandem, he talks about the simile of, like, just as, like, imagine you have a piece of iron that's been sitting out in the sun all day. It's super hot. Y'all know, like, when you sit on bleachers with shorts in the middle of the summer, like that. It's like super hot. And it starts to rain and the drops hit the iron and dissolve and evaporate immediately, right? It takes a while for the rain to fall, but once it does, it evaporates quite quickly. And this is the simile the Buddha uses for how quickly we are able to let go of these disagreeable thoughts and feelings. So can we let that thought or feeling of guilt or shame dissolve and evaporate without fueling the fire? Because sometimes what we'll do, like I've said a couple times, we'll say, oh, I suck, or this is the worst. We add more and more and more and more onto it, and it just makes it so much harder to actually let go. And the other thing that we can do is greet our shame and guilt and remorse with compassion. So compassion is often, I've heard it described as the quivering of the heart in response to pain. And I think I have time for this story. I apologize if some of y'all have heard it before, but I was on my first meditation retreat. It was a 7-day silent retreat. And I carpooled with 2 really cool people who I had not met, but they were really cool, and I also wanted to be super cool. And so we spent the whole car ride getting to know each other, jamming out. We get there and we go into silence. So I have these new friends who I'm like, catching eyes every once in a while, being like, oh, it's my friend. Or like we're sitting on the same porch drinking tea at the same time. Oh, it's my friend. And we're silent this whole time. And one day I'm following one of those friends into the Dharma hall. And you remove your shoes before you go into the Dharma hall. And my friend takes their shoes off and puts them in the grass and heads inside. And as I'm taking my shoes off, I notice it starts to rain. And so my inclination was take my friend's shoes and put them out of the way of the rain into a covered area instead of out in the middle of the grass. And so I did that. I took those shoes and I put them in a safer place so they didn't get super wet. And then I walk inside the Dharma hall and my mind, this shame, this guilt, says, why the fuck did you do that? Now they're going to go outside and be like, who touched my shoes? That's super weird. You have 2 options. You can either go back outside and move the shoes back into the rain, or you can tell them you moved the shoes. Those are the only 2 options my mind had. And so I went up to the front of the Dharma hall before we had started meditation, and I went up to this friend and I kind of mimed at them like, right? And they're like, and so I whisper, it started raining, so I moved your shoes. And they go, thank you. And I go and I sit back down, and guilt and shame really showed up. You just broke silence to tell someone you did a dumb thing like move their shoes. You're so selfish. You didn't even do it because you wanted them to have dry shoes. You did it because you wanted to be a good person. Right? The mind can be so mean. It can, and again, it's did I need to feel bad for that? Did I kill somebody? Did I do something in that list of unskillful? No, but the reaction, the harsh speech that comes from it. And so I just beat myself up and I start crying while I'm meditating, and I'm like, I gotta talk to somebody about this. So I talked to Andrew Chapman, who was one of the teachers here, and I told him what happened. And he said, sometimes all you can do is say, wow, mind, it really crushes me when you do that. It really crushes me when you do that. And I'm not kidding y'all, I think that was the first time I ever experienced self-compassion. So when these moments of guilt and shame and remorse come up, it's important to cultivate wisdom enough to know what they are, see them for what they are, which is just a thought or a feeling. Noting, is it skillful, is it unskillful? What can I learn from it? And it's also really important, because the heart is the essence of this, to have compassion. And so when I inevitably show up late to our 6:30 a.m. sit one of these next weeks, can I notice that it's important to me and I'd like to make more of an effort? Or maybe it's a good opportunity for me to say, maybe this is not the best thing for me right now, right? Maybe my body can't handle this sort of wake up. But can I have compassion and say, oh, sweet bean, you're just trying your best. It just really crushes me when you tell me you're a shitty person. Like, man, there's a lot of power in compassion. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to practice the compassion piece of this. We're going to go into the heart. We're going to turn towards the pain, turn towards the guilt, turn towards the shame, and then bear witness and let it go. Just like the water evaporates on an iron plate, we let it go. The fact that we can hold so much of this in our heart proves its vastness. And skillful practice is how we build esteem. It's how we cultivate a pure heart and ultimately liberating ourselves not only from guilt and shame, but suffering altogether. And so I'd love to take some time to just run y'all through a compassion meditation. We'll do about 20, 25 minutes. And we're going to do compassion for self. And I will tell you, sometimes these meditations can get a little intense in the sweet mind. So if it turns out to be a little too much, I always offer just open your eyes and maybe pick a color and start to see how many times, make that your anchor. So it's like, oh, I see a gold thing and a gold thing and a gold thing and a gold thing, or a red thing. And that's a great way to ground yourself if it starts to be a little triggering. We'll have time for some questions as well. But yeah, I'm going to run y'all through just a brief meditation, and then we'll do some discussion. Thank y'all. Okay. So again, finding a posture that feels suitable for about 20, 25 minutes. I want you to also maybe throw some emphasis on nurturing posture. What is a posture that feels nurturing to the body and compassionate? Close your eyes if it feels safe and comfortable. And we'll begin and end with the sound of the bell. Again, maybe starting with just a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Coming back to this space of curiosity and intention. This time we'll start with a short body scan. So see if you can gather all your awareness to the very top of your head. Whatever that looks and feels like to you, just gathering your awareness at the very crown of the head. And from here, we'll scan down slowly, just searching for any points of tension that may need to be softened. So scanning down, unfurrowing the brow, softening the cheeks, unclenching the jaw if needed. Inviting softness into the face and head. Letting that softness travel through the neck and the throat. To the shoulders, dropping them if needed. Scanning into the arms, all the way to the fingertips. Seeing what it feels like to simply have your hands resting. Now bringing some awareness to the top of the back and the chest. The middle of the back and the abdomen. The lower back and the belly. And again, we're inviting softness in, we're not forcing it. Scanning into the hips and the point of contact with your chair or cushion. Taking note that underneath the chair or cushion there is a floor supporting you. And underneath that floor there is the earth supporting you. So seeing if you can tap into this feeling of groundedness by being directly supported by the earth. And bringing that soft groundedness into the tops of the legs. To the knees. The shins. Calves. Tops of the feet. And bottoms of the feet. Just resting in this soft and still body as best you can. And within this body there is an emotional core. There is a place where we feel joy and sadness and shame and guilt and pain. Sometimes you hear this called the heart center of the body, where we feel emotion. And for some of us, this is in the chest, right above the actual heart, or it could be in the belly or the gut. But ask yourself, within this body, where is the heart center for you? Where is the heart center? Letting whatever you land on first be good enough. Let's bring some awareness to that heart center. Almost like you can breathe in and out of it. Some folks may find it helpful to place a hand on the heart center, just as a way to deepen the connection for our own deepest desires for well-being. So while maintaining some connection to this heart center, I'm going to invite you to bring to mind something that is causing you to feel guilty or shameful. And we don't want to work with the biggest, baddest thing we got. Instead, try starting a little small, something manageable. Maybe you made a mistake at work, or you said something you wish you wouldn't have, or you were late. Maybe you didn't do something you said you were going to do. Whatever it is, whatever is causing you to feel some of this shame and guilt, keeping it manageable and just bringing it to the forefront of the mind while maintaining this connection to the heart. We're going to turn towards the pain, turn towards the shame, turn towards the guilt instead of trying to push it away. So as we hold this situation in the mind's eye and hold the connection to the heart, we'll start by silently offering this phrase directly to the shame, to the guilt, to the pain. Just silently offering the phrase, I see you. I see you, pain. I see you. Just over and over, letting your pain know that you see it. Because after all, most of the time, it's only two things: what is loved and what is longing to be loved. So can we give some love? I see you. Now trying on the phrase silently, I feel you. Hey guilt, I feel you. Shame, I feel you. Over and over again, I feel you. Next, trying on the phrase, I know you. I know you. I know you. And lastly, offering this phrase of I love you to the shame, pain, the guilt. I love you. So from here, what we'll do is maintaining this connection to the heart and holding this situation in the mind. Continue to silently cycle through these phrases. I see you. I feel you. I know you. I love you. Over and over again. I see you. I feel you. I know you. And I love you. Whenever the mind wanders away, just coming back to these phrases, coming back to this heart. We'll continue this practice in silence together for the next few minutes, and then I'll ring the bell to sound the end of the meditation.
What's up, y'all? Reverend Mikey Noshel here from Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks for checking us out. Do me a favor, please like and subscribe. And if you feel moved to leave a donation, you can do so at wildheartmeditationcenter.org or the Venmo link in the description. Peace and love.